let's take a look at how to manipulate objects. We're going to start off with select and move. So the select tool is right here, and it's also the space bar. So we can select objects simply by left clicking on them. So if I left click on this object, you can see that it's selected, this one is selected, and this one is selected. Now if you want, you can also add or subtract to a selection, so you can select multiple objects. All you have to do is hold down the Shift key. Now when I hold down the Shift key, notice how my cursor changes to a plus minus, and that allows me to either add or subtract. So if I click on it the first time, it adds, and if I click on it a second time, it subtracts. So we can basically just toggle that to select or deselect. Now I'm constantly holding down the Shift key. If I don't hold down the Shift key and I select one object, the others deselect. Now in order to deselect one or more objects, you just click on nothing. So if I click here, there's nothing selected. If I Shift select all of these and then click over here, they all deselect. Now another way to select is to just use a box. So all you have to do is left click and drag, and you can draw a box around anything you want to select, and it selects. Now that object has to fall entirely within the box. Now if you want to, you can also hold down your Shift key and deselect, or you can use the box in conjunction with the Shift key. So if I hold down Shift, I can box select these and box select this, and so on. Now another way to select multiple objects is to use what's called the lasso tool, and that's in my additional tools, and so here we have lasso. And that just allows you to draw a shape, and if the objects fall within that shape, they are selected. So I'm going to left click and drag and select those objects. Now typically I don't need this, so I'm just going to go back to the select tool. Now, in addition to selection, we can also move objects. So I'm going to go over to my Move tool, and it's this tool here. The hotkey for that is the letter M. Now, if you just move your cursor, you'll see that we have the Move tool selected. You get those arrows. And if you hover over an object, you'll see that it kind of highlights, and that means that that object can be moved. So if I hover over this object, it highlights. I can left click and drag and move that. Now if I continue holding down, you can see it snaps to red, green, and blue. And now if I want to lock in that axis, I can hold down the Shift key, and that will highlight that axis and lock it to that axis. Very similar to what we do in drawing. Now we also can select and move multiple objects. I'm going to go into my Select tool, Shift select these objects, and then hit M for move, and now I can move all of these at once. And then I'm going to deselect those. And we can also move very precisely. So if you want, you can move by specific amounts. So let's go ahead and select this red box here and select our Move tool. Now if I want, I can say move this along the x-axis, and you notice in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm getting a distance. So it knows I'm moving along that axis, and if I want to, I can type in a specific distance. So if I type in, for example, 2 feet, it will jump to 2 feet. Now if I wanted to move it the other way, I can move it that way. Now I'm not going to have to type in -2 feet. I can just type in 2 feet again, and it knows I'm moving it in that direction. So I don't really have to do positive and negative. It kind of infers what direction I'm trying to move it. Another way to move precisely is to use snapping. So if I select this object and use my Move tool, notice how when I hover over this, I get these little highlights in the corner. And those allow me to select those specific corners, and so when I move, I can snap those to that corner to get a very precise move. And you'll probably see it a little bit easier on this box. So I'm going to go ahead and select this box and then select my Move tool. And again, notice how each corner I can get a little handle there. And so if I left click and drag, that corner is going to snap to whatever surface or vertex I choose. So if I go up to this table, it will snap to the face of the table. And if I grab, say, this corner here, I can snap to, say, the corner, that front corner of the table, or I can snap to a midpoint. And I can also grab things such as midpoints. So if I were to, say, grab this midpoint here, I could snap to that midpoint, and so on. Now you have to be careful where you grab your objects. Let's select this cylinder and select the Move tool. Now I can grab these corners, but if I grab it, say, somewhere towards the middle here and start moving, you'll see that it's actually snapping from that point where I grabbed it. So really where you first touch that object to move it is where it's going to snap. So if you want this to snap to the tabletop, you got to kind of grab one of the ones on the bottom, and then that should go on the face of the table. So select and move are really easy tools to use, and I'm sure you'll be using these a lot in SketchUp Free. Now let's take a look at the rotate and scale tool. You'll find these here underneath the Move tool. So let's go ahead and select rotate. The hotkey for that is the letter Q. And you'll see you get this little protractor type icon. Now, as you move through the scene, notice how the orientation of this changes. And so it snaps to, say, the green, the red, and the blue axis. And it can also snap to any face in the object. So if I go, say, to this cylinder here, you'll see it's not really snapping to a specific axis, and that's because it's a curved surface, but I can snap to the top of that and get that because that's a flat plane that's aligned to an axis. So let's go ahead and do some rotations. So the rotate tool works pretty simple. All you do is you left click to set a rotate point, and then you drag out a line. Now you can snap that line to any axis, so in this case green or red. So I'm going to snap to red, left click, and now we can rotate. So now I can rotate that around. And notice how in the bottom right hand corner we're getting an angle. So I'm going to snap at 90 degrees, which aligns with the green axis. And if you left click again, it ends the rotate. So let's do that one more time. Click in the middle, left click. This time I'm going to drag out to green, left click, rotate, snap to 90. Now we don't have to rotate to specific 90-degree angles. We can rotate to any angle we want. So I'm going to go ahead and left click to set the point, left click again, and then just drag a little bit, and I can type in any angle I want. So let's say I want to type in the number 20. It will go ahead and rotate at 20 degrees. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo that by doing Control Z. Now another thing you want to know about the rotate tool is that your position when you start the rotation is important. So let's go ahead and activate the tool with the letter Q, and let's go down to this red box. So if I snap to that green axis and go down to that corner of the box, left click, drag out a line, you'll notice that it's going to rotate around that edge. So if I left click again and start rotating, I'm actually tilting that box up on its edge. And if you need to precisely position this, this might be a good place to rotate. Now, if I were to rotate this, say, from just a random point on the box, you can see that, yes, it's rotating around that point, but it isn't really rotating around a specific edge. So that may work for your application, but the main point is that you have to make sure that you position your tool correctly when rotating. So the next tool we want to look at is the scale tool, and this is actually pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and select the scale tool. The hotkey for that is the letter S, and it's right below the rotate tool. And just like with all these other tools, you can hover over an object. So I'm going to hover over this table and left click. Now you get all of these little green handles, and these all do different things. So if you select the ones in the middle, it will scale around the opposite point. So in other words, it will scale along an axis. So in this case, I'm scaling along green. If I go over here, I'm going to scale along red. Now, if you grab one of these corners, that's going to be scaling around that plane. If I grab this corner, that's uniform scale around the opposite corners. This is a great way to just scale it up or down. Now you can also type in specific dimensions if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this corner again, left click and drag, and then I'm just going to type in the number 1.5. And that scales it up to 1.5 times the size it was. If I type in 1 and hit enter, that puts it back to where it was. So these tools combined with select and move are great ways to arrange and move objects in your scene. In addition to moving, rotating, and scaling objects, we can also do the same operations to faces and edges. So here I have a simple model, and you can see I can select the edges and faces of this particular model. So let's go ahead and select this face, and I'm going to select my move tool. So once I do that, I can actually move this face. You can see I can snap to the red axis, and in the bottom right hand corner I also have a distance. So if I wanted to say move this say 3 feet, I can do that, and that extends the roof of that particular object. Now I could do that again to say this wall. If I select this face of the wall and hit the move tool, I can do that. Now I don't have to move specifically along this axis. I can move it left, right, or up and down, but sometimes that's going to break the model. So you got to be really careful how you do it when you start working with this tool. And you'll notice that by moving along this axis is very similar to the push-pull tool. Now we don't have to work with just faces. We can work with edges. So I have this edge here along the top. If I want to, I can move that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that and just move it vertically. You can see I can extend that roof. Now I don't have to just move, I can also rotate. So I'm going to select this face right along the front edge of that foundation / sidewalk. And let's select our rotate tool. And I'm going to snap to the blue axis and then snap to that endpoint there and just drag out and then rotate that. And you can see that when I rotate around that specific point, I can get this to move at an angle. Now I can also scale. So let's go ahead and take that and scale it. If I want to, I could scale it, say, around an opposite point, similar to how the rotate goes, or if I wanted to, I could scale it up or down. But notice how that breaks it. So you got to be careful with that. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And let's go ahead and just go back to select mode. So as you can see, it's a really easy way to manipulate your models. And sometimes moving, rotating, or scaling edges and faces can be a great way to fine-tune or tweak your model. As we start to create scenes in SketchUp, we may have to duplicate objects, and we can do that in several different ways. Probably the easiest and most simple way to do it is to simply copy and paste. So I can just use my select tool and select an object, hit Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And once I paste it, I can move it wherever I want. So go ahead and left click and that locks it in. So now I have 2 of those coffee tables. Now another way to duplicate objects is actually a little more precise, and we can use things such as the move and the rotate tool to duplicate objects. So I'm going to go ahead and select this chair and then select the move tool. Now when I select the move tool, notice how Control equals copy. So if I hold down the Control key, notice how I get a little plus sign. So if I hit Control, it basically toggles it on or off. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control, get that plus sign, left click and drag, and notice how I can actually make a copy. And in the bottom right hand corner, because I'm moving it, I can also have a specific distance. So I'm going to type in 5 feet. So now I've moved that exactly 5 feet and created a copy. Now if we want to, we can do this again But we can also do multiples, so I can actually create multiple copies. So again, I'm going to hit the Move tool, touch Control, get that plus sign, left click and drag, and again, I'm going to type in 5 feet, but this time I'm going to type in times 3. And what that does is it creates 3 copies, so 2 additional, so 1, 2, 3. This is great. Let's say we wanted to create a conference room. We can just box select all of these, hit the Move tool, Control, move those back, and now I have a bunch of those. So it's very easy to create arrays of things using that copy tool. Now you can also do this with the Rotate tool. So let's go ahead and select this table, and I'm going to go to Rotate, and now I'm going to snap to the top of that, left click and drag, and I'm going to again touch Control. So notice how I'm getting that plus sign. If I left click and start to copy, there we go. So now I have a copy of that table. Now we can also be a little bit more precise with this. So again, I'm going to hit Q to get into my Rotate tool. And then I'm going to select something towards the middle of this coffee table. Left click, hit Control, and rotate that. Let's go ahead and rotate it a specific amount. So I'm going to rotate that, say, 20. And then I'm going to go times, say, 6. So now you see I'm starting to get a nice array. And this is a great way to create radial arrays of things that need to go around a central point. These are some great tools that you can use to quickly create copies in any sort of pattern that you want.